The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are wrapping up our look at the Guardian cards in the Path to Carcosa Investigator expansion. In this episode, we discuss 45 Automatic Level 2, Eat Lead Level 2, First Aid Level 3, Stick to the Plan, and Armor of Ardennes. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Before we get started, a quick reminder of how we rate cards here on The Whisper in Darkness. The best of the best get an Elder Sign, while the worst of the worst get an Auto Fail, and the cards in between get a +1, 0, or Elder Thing respectively. Cards that you build around or cards that are good in one particular deck get a Bless token, while cards that we believe are destined to end up on the list of taboos or are simply bad for the big game get a Curse token. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. You all rock! If you'd like to be amazing like these people and support the channel's goals and see your name on this list, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Special thanks to Cole Monroe Chitty, Nicole Fiscus, and Nate Lost in Time and Space for their contributions to the channel. I couldn't do it without you. Without further ado, let's get started. Welcome back, everyone, to our reviews of the player cards in the Path to Carcosa Investigator expansion. This is the final batch of Guardian cards in the box. We are going to start off with the upgrade for the 45 Automatic, a classic from the core set. This is 4 cost asset, 2 XP, has a combat and agility skill icon, item, weapon, and firearm trait, uses 4 ammo. As an action, spend 1 ammo, fight, you get +2 combat for this attack. This attack deals +1 damage. Ignore the retaliate keyword for this attack, and it takes up a hand slot. Thoughts on the upgrade for the 45?
This is a very solid weapon in solo and 2-player.
It actually is, yeah.
Oftentimes, you +2 is enough. Once you get +4 over the bag in standard, you're basically beating everything except the auto. And you don't need anything else. You don't need a lightning gun most of the time. Generally, a 45 has enough damage output, especially if you're Mark and you've got like a 32 Colt on the side. That's usually enough. And then ignoring retaliate is actually pretty nice because you're going to use this against bosses if you're someone like Mark. So it's like you have the 45 and the Colt. Use the Colt to kill the smaller enemies that don't have retaliate. And then you have your 45 to kill the boss, which likely does have retaliate, and you get to ignore it.
Yeah, the thing about 45 Automatic that has actually kept me playing it over the years is that there are actually very few weapons that suit the one-handed playstyle, especially in Guardian. Nate, pop quiz. How many XP weapons that take up one hand can Guardian take?
I think it's only 2, right?
You are correct. And we've mentioned
this and Time Worn Brand, right?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I meant the 32 Colt because it's a firearm. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I meant to say firearm. Because there's also Enchanted Blade level 3. That's a whole other thing, whether you're doing melee or not. But the firearm playstyle, there are 2 firearms that are one-handed that take XP. And that's this and 32 Colt.
Yep.
Yeah, that Guardians can take. Rogues have tons of them, but they're, that's different. I still kind of like this thing because, it does what it does. Often enough, if I'm playing like Roland and I want to use my other hand for something else, then this isn't too bad. And I feel like with Roland, I'm not feeling too comfortable with the Colt. So I kind of like the +2 of the automatic. The retaliate doesn't come into play that often, but it can save your butt because because often enough you miss, like you go to shoot an enemy engaged with your friend. If you miss, not only do you hit your friend for 2 damage, but the enemy attacks you for multiple damage, and then that's a lot of damage all at once. So yeah. It's nice to have that comfort of not having to worry. Yeah. So I kind of like this thing.
Yeah, I appreciate the 45 Automatic because as a solo player, you tend to be running with less XP. And so a lot of the big Guardian weapons are either 5 XP and very expensive, or take up 2 hands, which creates problems of its own because usually you want something else in your other hand, especially if you're playing somebody like Roland. You may want your magnifying glass or whatnot, and having a one-handed weapon and that gives you +2 bonus and still gives you the damage. I don't know how this would scale in multiplayer. I think Guardians at that level would tend to want to buy bigger stuff because they have to just chew through so much more health, then I think the +1 damage may not be enough to do that. But if you're playing in lower counts, this is definitely a nice option.
So in my experience, it's a playstyle thing. Because the problem you get into is if you want to play multiplayer and you want to be a specialist guardian, you want to have a really big gun, you're looking at 10 XP for your guns, 6 XP for six of the plan, 1 XP for Ever Vigilant, 4 XP for Vicious Blows, and just goes on and on and on, and then you've spent way too much XP. And personally, I've just hit a point where I want to have different decks, and so what I'll end up doing often is I'll play 45 automatic level 2, upgrade to a level 2 weapon, and then upgrade auto damage coming from other places like beat cups, agency backup, vicious blows, things like that. Because it's just hard to stuff all that stuff into one deck with the your XP budget.
Yeah, and with Mark doesn't really need a bigger weapon. He's very competent with just a 45 automatic.
Yeah, because he's at 7 just right out of the gate, even before allies. Plus, Mark draws a lot, so he can run out of ammo and just replace it because he has good draw.
How would you guys rate this one?
I give this one a solid +1. I'm not ready to give it an Elder Sign because I do think that if you're willing to spend like 3 XP and you have a larger card pool, this kind of falls by the wayside a little bit. But it's a very solid card.
Yeah, I like it too. I feel like it's one of those things that's like kind of a sleeper hit because it fits. Because if you play that deck that I was just talking about, and I've done this a few times in like Roland, where you spend your XP on other things besides guns, then I think that the fact that it's one-handed and it's kind of like it's not a zillion XP, it gets the job done. So I'm also going to give it a +1 because I think it fills that niche. It's a role filler, as you would say, Nate. It's a role filler,
Yeah, it's a very solid solo card too.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, this one will also get a +1 from me. Not really much to complain about. I mean, you get the +2 combat, which for Mark puts him at a 7. That's going to hit just about most everything. And then, of course, the +1 damage. I guess the only bad thing I can say about this being in this box is that Path to Carcosa does feature those enemies that cannot be hit by it, which is problematic for Guardians.
That's like 1 encounter set. It's like 2 physical cards.
Yeah, but if you get caught with one of those,
well, you know what you do with that. You know what you do? You use your Ever Vigilant for its skill icons. That's how you deal with those. Or you get you remember that Daisy can take shriveling.
Yeah, it's a minor nitpick, but something to keep in mind. The next card is Eat Lead Level 2. It is a free event with combat and agility skill icons, tactic trait fast. Play when you activate the fight ability on a firearm asset. You may spend X additional ammo tokens from this asset. When you reveal chaos tokens for this attack, reveal X additional chaos tokens. Choose 1 to resolve and ignore the rest. Never played this one. It does have a downgrade? Is it level 1?
Oh, yeah. The downgrade's really good, actually, because it's no XP. Yeah.
But this was the Guardian Capstone card in Dim Carcosa, I believe, the original Mythos pack. I guess if you have only 1 shot left and you got to make it count.
Yeah.
And you got the ammo to spare. But I have a tough time spending ammo on not shooting stuff.
That's the problem. And also it costs XP. I mean, that being said, like, if X is 1, that means you mitigate the autofail. And there's definitely something to be said about that. Because you can mitigate the autofail if X is 1. Okay, so you spend 1 additional ammo, reveal 2 chaos tokens, choose 1. That's what the level 0 version does, which is. So I think in this deck that I've been like kind of talking about, where you play like pistols, I think this kind of fits that because you're not spending a zillion XP on your guns, and you can actually afford stuff like Eat Lead. Plus, at this point in the card pool, big guns have very few shots, which is kind of a problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're playing 32 Colt,
Yeah, I was gonna say this pairs pretty nicely with the Colt, And if you have
Yeah.
Return to Carcosa and you have the upgraded one, then that's pretty cool.
Yeah, you're right. You know what? I'm just going to come out right now and say this is a bless. I think it goes in a certain play style, a certain kind of deck, and I think it works really well because, the Cult, the problem with the Cult is your boost isn't that high, compared to, say, Lightning Gun. But then you use this card to mitigate that.
Kind of
saying
gives
like,
you
my
a
boost
pseudo gym type effect where you're sort of mitigating the bag rather than
Yeah,
just
exactly.
brute forcing the solution. Yeah. I can
Yeah.
see that.
I'm gonna come right out and I'm gonna say it's a blast because you know what? I think in that alternate playstyle where you don't spend 10 XP on guns, I think this is a good card.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you're spending 10 XP on guns, your modifier is so far over and you have so few shots that you can't spare this.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like maybe the Thompson is the other one that you might.
Oh
wanna-
yeah, Thompson. Yeah, that's true. Which comes into play later, but you're right.
I think
Yeah.
that's like the other weapon that you could potentially go into as well, because that's 3 XP, and then you'd have 2 XP for this, so that's not bad either.
Yeah, if you're doing like Thompson stuff. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, this card is definitely a bit of a sleeper, because like Matt said, I do agree with you that you have to build around, or have like a certain play style in mind to use this card.
To be able to afford it.
That too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think a bless is a fair rating.
Everybody's going bless, eh?
Well, no. I just came right out and said it, and I gave my reasoning. Your reasoning could be totally different. So you don't have to join the crowd. We're not tribes, okay? You can give this a curse and we'll still be friends. All right.
I don't think I have ever played this card. I appreciate the ability, though. And if you've got the ammo to spare, this is one of the few cards that Guardians have that can manipulate the Chaos Bag. So it is an event, so you got to pick your shot where you need this. But I do say that, if you are at the end of the game, the thing needs to die this turn, or somebody else is going to die on your side, then spending an ammo that you probably weren't going to shoot anyway is a good bet. So I'm going to go 0 on this one. I think it's solid enough. The ability is good enough that if somebody showed up with this in their deck, I would certainly not hold it against them.
Yeah,
as long as they were playing the weapons that can afford it. Like if you're playing shotguns and lightning guns and all stuff like that, then no, you've made a mistake at some point along the way. But as long as you got the ammo,
I think especially with Vicious Blow and things like that, if you're combining Vicious Blow and that, like, Eat Lead is super good in that situation.
Right. If you're loading everything up.
Eat Lead plus, like, double or nothing if you're playing with not taboo.
I was about to say. Yeah, you load up on one skill test, and then you have, like, your overpower in there. Yeah, I see what you mean. You really don't want it to fail. Just X being 1 is probably good enough. I think this also rewards experienced play, because when you become an experienced player, you start really understanding and forecasting when the big shots are. And when, like, I really need to not fail this, you start being able to, like, foresee those moments. And then I think that's when Eat Lead really comes in, is when you know this is the shot that's going to really matter, and I need to not fail this.
Yeah, and sometimes that's not always at the end of the game. Sometimes that's in the middle of the game. It's like, if we don't get through this hurdle now, we are not going to make it to the...
Or if I miss this and I trigger Retaliate and Blast Daisy, like, we're in big trouble. Yeah,
this is one of those cards that helps avoid shooting your fellow investigators in the face by accident. So
which is ironic because you're saying Eat Lead, so you're shooting more to
everywhere. But you spend more bullets and you become more precise.
But I think it is interesting to compare some of the cards that we've looked at throughout this batch of Guardian cards, where they seem overly concerned about potentially hitting your fellow investigator. So it's like, you really should engage the enemy off of that investigator, then deal with it. So we're going to give you a lot of cards that allow you to do that. And then the better card in the set is the one that just says, just shoot. Spend an extra ammo, draw an extra token to mitigate the failure, And just shoot. Don't
Yeah.
engage, just shoot. So
Well, you got let me handle this as well. It's like you got let me handle this to cover them when they draw the enemy. And if you don't have let me handle this, you got eat lead. Like, you got tools. You don't need to take the engage action. You don't have to do that. You got other cards.
the next card in the box is First Aid level 3, 2-cost asset that has 2 willpower skill icons, talent, and science traits. Uses 4 supplies. If First Aid has no supplies, discard it. As an action, spend 1 supply, heal 1 damage, and 1 horror from an investigator or ally asset at your location. This, of course, is an upgrade for First Aid level 0 from the core set and was reprinted in the revised core. So if you started with the revised core, you've probably got 4 copies of First Aid level 3 now, which is probably at least 2 copies too many. I think we did actually kind of like this one in the revised core. It's certainly better than the level 0 version. I'll give it that.
Yeah. Because like we said in that review, the fact that this heals 1 and 1 does help to kind of compensate for how slow it is.
Yeah, it heals both in 1 card. Yeah, and like personally, like having played a variety of investigators, in multiplayer especially, including support investigators, like I found this to be like, if my deck is like slow and sturdy enough that I don't need to like race, then I think this kind of like does it about right. And it wasn't until recently that healing got faster. This kind of was like kind of a premier healing card for a while. And I think at this point in the card pool, like Core Dunwich and Carcosa, this is like as good as it gets for healing, mainly because it deals 1 and 1. So you don't need a heal damage card and a heal horror card. You got it both. And it's slotless. And 4 charges is quite a bit.
And 2 matching skill icons. So if you draw it late in the game, it's still relatively useful.
Yeah, or if you already have one on the table and you draw Rotting Remains, you can just throw it in.
Yeah, it's not a bad card.
Yeah,
by any means. I don't know if I include 2 in my decks, but if I have the extra XP, like having 1 is fine. It's cheap enough that if you draw it, you're generally going to have the money to play it, even in Guardian. It's not too hard to maybe even have an extra action to gain a resource and then play it if you need to, but it's okay. It's something that you can kind of do in the mid game if you have the time, especially later in campaigns where people start to take trauma, and now you have like some actual use case for it early game, then it becomes okay. Like you heal off the trauma before things get real. That can be okay, but yeah. Nothing special.
And I've found in like 3-4 player, often enough you hit a situation where like Daisy got ganked by like grasping hands or something. Now she's at 2 health, and it's like, okay, let me top you up. But you can also, but this card also handles the occasion where like Roland gets ganked by Rotting Remains, and he's already got trauma from his cover up, and it's like, oh, this helps you as well.
Yeah, I think the fact that it does 1 and 1 is way better than the level 0 version. Spending 3 XP, I think that's probably going to be the biggest barrier, depending on what kind of Guardian you're building. We have the next card we're going to talk about, Stick to the Plan, of course, is costing you 6, and then, as Matastrophic mentioned, between guns and Ever Vigilant and all that, this one you're probably not going to pick up for a while.
But Mark does like this card quite a bit.
Yes, he does, because if you squint hard enough, you'll realize that Mark only has 5 health.
Yes. 5 health and 5 sanity.
Yep, that's
it. Helps with both problems that he has. So yeah,
that's true.
It's useful in Mark, so it's definitely a wise inclusion in this.
So how'd you guys rate this one? What did we
rate it
before?
0. I think I gave it a 0, maybe a +1. No, it must have been.
Yeah, I feel like 0. Like I would rate this one a 0. It does what it does. It's one of the better healing cards available, certainly at this time of the game.
Yeah,
I might have rated it a little higher within just the core set, because just the core set, this is probably one of the better upgrades.
Yeah, because if you have just the core set and your horror soak options are Elder Sign Amulet, then this is pretty good.
Yeah, this is pretty good in that context. But with more cards, this is still okay.
Yeah, I'd still give this a 0. I think it's still pretty, like, if you've got the time and you've got the XP and you're playing that supporty investigator and I think this is pretty good. So I'm gonna give this
Yeah.
a 0 as well. Yeah,
I think in Mark 2, Mark has the card draw to find his one copy of it,
that's true. He does. Yeah.
and he
Mhm.
will always need damage healing.
Oh
And
yeah,
he'll probably need some horror healing at some point as well. He's very squishy in sanity terms, so
it's true.
it's nice
Yeah.
to have that.
Yeah, that's true. And he doesn't have access to a lot of sanity soak at this point in the game,
Hmm.
like at all, because he's all in on Guardian.
Yeah, he doesn't
Yeah,
have something worth fighting for yet.
that's right. And he's not Roland, so he doesn't have like art student.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there you go. He's got combat training, but
Well, we've been talking around it for most of the reviews of the Guardian cards. We have finally reached Stick to the Plan. It is a 3 cost, doesn't cost anything because it's a permanent 3 XP, but because it's exceptional, it'll cost you 6. As a reaction, before you draw your opening hand, search your deck for up to 3 different tactic and or supply events and attach them to Stick to the Plan. Shuffle your deck. Cards attached to Stick to the Plan may be played as if they were in your hand. As an additional cost to play an attached card, exhaust Stick to the Plan. I can't think of many cards that have revolutionized a class as much as Stick to the Plan has for Guardians. It is 6 XP, which is a substantial investment. And but back in when this was first released, you had, of course, Ever Vigilant. You had Prepare for the Worst was another common choice
And
for this one, so you could
Emergency
find
cache,
your weapon. Turn 1. There's Emergency Cache. This came out in the Black Stars Rise Mythos pack, so there was a Guardian card that was released in Dim Carcosa, but I think everybody would pretty much agree that this was the capstone of the Guardian cards in Path.
Oh, without question. Yeah, I think this is probably the best consistency card in the game.
yeah, because this for 6 XP, this does more than even what Seekers can do
Mhm.
when it comes to like card drawing. Because what it really is you start with an 8-card hand, which is already worth 6 XP, you know, and then on top of that, you get to pick 3 of them. It's like,
Yeah, it basically ensures that you're always going to be, and that is so invaluable in this game.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you don't set up early, you're dead in this game.
Yeah.
Like, there's no two ways around it. There's no sugarcoating it. If you do not get your assets in play early, you are dead. You are just
for Ever Vigilant. Even beyond that, just the fact that you can like put you can go down to single copies of events that you want to see early, and you can put them on the Stick to the Plan, or you can do one-ofs of very specific events like Dynamite Blast, which you won't always play, but it kind of sucks to draw because they have bad icons. You put them on the Stick to the Plan,
or they cost 5 resources. Yeah.
yeah, or
like
they
that.
cost 5 resources, and you may or may not get to play it. Just cards that you don't always want to draw mid-game. You know, you can just stick them on the Stick to the Plan. And I've used it for all sorts of things. Like Mark Harrigan, oh man, I've put Elusive on this. I've put Shortcut on this. I've put lots of events from later in the card pool on this thing before. I've used this thing in like basically any investigator that can take it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
that's just it. It's like you can build a deck with any investigator that can take it, and it's still invaluable.
I've even played like low event decks where it's like I don't really even want to take this because my tactics and supplies are pretty good, but I've still realized, oh my goodness, I'll just go up to 3 tactic events just to put them on Stick to the Plan because you come out of your deck and they start in your hand. You know, even if it's just like Emergency Cache and Ever Vigilant and like Dynamite Blast, you're still like doing really well.
That's
You know
all
what I'm
you
saying?
need,
Like,
generally.
it's like even
that's
all you
just
need.
it.
Like, yeah, so like even if you're playing like low impact events, just the fact that you start with all 3 of them in your hand, kind of, and they're not in your deck, like, is so good. It's so good. Like, just like Seekers don't even get this efficient, you know.
Yeah, this is one of those cards that's just gotten better with time, because as we've seen, as the card pool has grown, we've just every set we seem to end up with 1 or 2 of these very niche events that have very particular, either a time in the game you want to play them or a particular scenario where you want to play them. And the fact that Stick to the Plan allows you to play, choose whichever 3 events you need at the time. So if you pick this up as soon as you can, scenario 3, I'm playing these 3 events. Scenario 4, I'm playing 3 other events on it because I know that they will be useful at certain times during that. And then of course you play scenario 8 and your choices may differ there as well. So it's just very, very solid for those types of cards. And I really wish that other classes had access to some like that, this type of ability sometimes, because there are just so many cards out there where you're just like, I would put this in my deck, but I just don't know if I'll ever use it.
Yeah, like if Mystic had a card like this that could hold like a spell, holy mother of pearl.
3 event spells, that would be so amazing, because it would just solve all the problems of
Even just
having to like have terrible card
one
draw.
or 2 spells.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, even if they're locked into being event spells, that'd be so nice. Yeah.
Stick to the plan is amazing. If you are not spending 6 XP on it, you may need to reevaluate how you're building your deck. It is a huge hit. I would make no bones about that. Generally, the fact that, especially in like Knight of the Zealot and Dunwich Legacy and Path to Carcosa, they're not overly generous with XP, certainly not compared to what they are in campaigns these days, where you can routinely seem to earn 7, 8, 9 XP on the first scenario. I think in Dunwich you're like closer to like 4 or 5 most of the time, so it may take you a couple scenarios to earn enough XP for this one, but you won't regret it.
Yeah, in fact, I'd go as far as saying is that like trying to fit in stick to the plan is what led to my going down that route of trying out decks that don't use big guns, that use like 45 automatic level 2, like the low XP upgrades, so that way you can get your stick to the plan going as soon as possible. So it's so good.
Yeah, because Stick to the Plan is a card you have to buy early in your campaigns.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to get as much use. Like, the longer you delay buying Stick to the Plan, the worse it gets.
The worse you're going to feel. Yeah.
Safe to say, Elder signs all round for Stick to the Plan. Yeah. It is did so much for the Guardian class and continues to really define the class going forward. I don't know. Is there a Guardian who doesn't like it?
Maybe Lily?
Lily was the one that came to my mind, but...
But even then, like, she still likes Ever Vigilant and Emergency Cash, so it's like...
So I do think I have played a couple of Guardians in the past where it was like almost debatable. Like, I think I've played a skill-heavy Guardian once where I just didn't have many events at all. And I was like, do I really want to spend 6 XP on getting my Ever Vigilant, out there? And I had like other priorities.
It's tough because
I think tough, though. It's tough. It's the exception though. Yeah.
I think it's in tandem with Ever Vigilant that really solidifies its position as just being probably the de facto best thing you can do with 8 experience in Guardian.
Yeah, it kind of is. Man, then there's the fact that you don't even have to double up on your good events, like your good XP events. Yeah, so good.
Like,
it's just hard to get over
really
that
does.
Sometimes.
It's like almost curse territory just because of how pervasive it is. But
yeah, I was thinking that, when we were rating it.
I do think there is
Guardian.
Yeah, it's like you could kind of argue that Stick to the Plan creates this sort of default game plan with Guardians where they all spend 8 XP, get Ever Vigilant, get Stick to the Plan. Every game kind of ends up being the same in that regard.
True. That is a valuable observation, actually, is that it kind of ends up becoming too... but it also like patches such a hole. Yeah. It just patches a hole in Guardian, though.
It does, yeah. And I think it's more... Like, yes, it does kind of lead to that, but like all Arkham games are kind of like you have to set up in every Arkham game. So like this is just the best way of doing that, I think.
Yeah, I think it's less an observation about like this game it's not the card that forces you down the playstyle, it's the fact that you have a class that's very based on assets. At least at this point in the game, of getting your gun, getting your ally. So you kind of need this to like get your Ever Vigilant and just actually get set up. I think more than a lot of other classes, you kind of have to.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
If this was the Seeker card, holy, this would be so stupid.
Yeah, but
It's not. It's a Guardian card. So
it's a Guardian card. Yeah, it's a.
Honestly, I think if they were to actually, like, if we were to give this a curse and they actually tabooed this in some way, that the community would just revolt.
Yeah, because the Guardian needs it. That's kind of the problem. Is you don't have an alternative. Like, there's no alternative to lean on. You know, like when you're a Guardian, because you don't have good card draw. You know, and you
don't have resource generation.
Yeah, you really don't. You know, and so you need Ever Vigilant on it to, get you out of the gate. Yeah.
It's like I think they even realized that when they did Geared Up too.
Oh yeah. Because
like Geared Up is kind of trying to do the same thing.
It is. It's more risky, but yeah,
more
it's
risky.
trying to do a similar thing.
It's trying to do something similar to stick to the player vigilant, but it just doesn't do it as well.
Doesn't do it as well. Yeah, because you have to do items.
Well, we come to the final card of our Guardian
reviews.
There's
a card after this?
There is one card after this. This was the, I guess, technically the true capstone of the expansion released in Dim Carcosa. This is Armor of Ardennes. It is a 4-cost asset that costs 5 XP, 2 willpower, and 2 combat skill icons, item, armor, and relic. As a response, when damage is assigned to Armor of Ardennes exhaust, Armor of Ardennes cancel 1 of that damage. It has 4 health and takes up a body slot. Never played this card. Just seemed way too much for too little.
I have. It was Mark Harrigan in Forgotten Age when you had like 60 XP. But that was it.
I could see it being good in that very one circumstance, because in that campaign you take a ton of damage.
Yeah, that's also true. The fact that you can, the fact that it cancels single damage pings is very nice. Yeah, it does. That part is nice. If you're getting hit by little 1,000 cuts, then that is pretty nice. I think the main problem with this card is that stick to the plan exists, and you just don't have XP for things like this.
Yeah, because I could see, like, if you're playing a very tanky build, like one of these would be enough, I would assume.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Yeah.
And then you basically just get in front of everything and just tank it forever.
Yeah. Yeah, in my case, it meant that I could take a 2 damage hit, put both of them in the Armor of Ardennes, cancel one of them, and still put one on and draw a card as Mark. That was kind of where I was going.
Or something where you can get a lot of utility out of like Guard Dog and Bee Cop and stuff like that, because you can protect them with the armor.
Exactly. Yeah, because at this point in the card pool, your only other option for the body slot is like Bulletproof Vest.
Yep, or Bandolier. Yeah, if you're doing something like that.
Yeah.
It's a neat card, I guess.
It's a lot of XP though for just Soak.
Yeah, for me, it's really I think the ability is kind of cool. And I can see definitely if you're playing a tanky character, well, this is a way to soak even more. But I just don't know who has 5 XP to spend on 1 copy, much less 10 for 2.
Hey, it's Forgotten Age, man. Everybody has XP. Everybody.
I think if this costs 3 XP, we'd be in business.
Yeah, I think so.
I think at 3 XP... I would consider playing one of this in a lot of decks, but at 5, like you said, that's just too much.
Yeah, you just don't have time for this. Yeah.
But I mean, if you want to play it, sure, I'll give it a 0.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
Oh yeah, you can take a lot of damage with this thing. Yeah, and it means you don't have to spend actions on healing yourself because this kind of like helps, get you through get you over the hump just by itself.
You can take attacks of opportunity much more liberally.
Yep, and you can get in situations where you're taking a bunch of damage, like in Forgotten Age. I like this thing, especially in Mark, because like I said, you could take a big hit. You can take a big hit of 3, but you could spread it around and still not worry about flipping Sophie.
Yeah.
When you got this thing, and still you draw your cards because you want to take some damage. So yeah, I'll give this a 0 as well for what it does. The only problem I think it has is that they're just other cards that do different things that also cost a lot of XP.
I'm going to knock this one down to an Elder thing. Just costs too much XP.
Yeah.
And the solo player in me will never buy this. There's just too many other priorities.
Yeah, that's true.
And yeah, it's just... I think in my original review of this, I described it as Guardian Bling. So if you've upgraded everything else and you've still got 5 XP to spare, then you might as well trick out your body slot. But this is something I wouldn't be buying for a long time, and if ever, most of the time.
What if stick to the plan didn't exist?
Then this would be a lot harder to get into play. They do kind of help each other out in that regard.
Yeah, it's just it's the XP, you know.
I do think there is a Mark deck that could potentially play stick to the plan, play Ever Vigilant, that's 7 XP. You've got your 2 45s, that's 11.
Oh, the cheap weapon.
Mhm.
Okay, you go cheap on
and
the
then you
weapons,
play
and then you can
one
afford those.
Armor of Arden, and that's 16.
Yeah.
So like that's
Yeah.
doable, and that seems okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then you basically have all the soak you'd ever need, and then you could use your allies as proactive means of dealing damage to enemies with Beat Cop or Guard Dog or Greta to get clues.
Yeah, I see.
Like,
what you mean.
I can see it.
But no way you're affording lightning guns.
No,
or
but
flamethrowers.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
you don't want that in
Yeah.
a deck like this. I don't think. I think in a deck like this, you're trying to be super tanky.
Right.
Use Mark's abilities, use B comps and stuff, and then let the armor soak up all this damage.
Right.
It definitely has Mark's number, and you know, it might even be a bless in Mark just because of, you know, his particular damage requirements and the fact that he needs to take damage, but he really wants to sort of mete it out in small portions and to avoid flipping Sophie over. So I don't know if I would ever consider playing this outside of Mark, to be honest.
Well,
like,
what
I
is
just
nice
don't know
about-
if this type of tanky Guardian exists. Like, I never view Guardians as particularly tanky to begin with. Like, if Yorick could take this, then sure. But
yeah, Yorick is definitely super.
But
tanky.
Yorick has like leather coats and teddy bears and whatnot that he can just recycle ad nauseum. So he doesn't need really to do anything like this. So
yeah, I think the disadvantage to Yorick though is that that's kind of all he does is tank stuff. Whereas Mark he's gonna fuck shit up and also
Yeah, it's true.
things.
And then also, get rewarded for taking damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely down. It definitely feels like this is part of that package of, you know, the paradigm is Daisy's helpless and Mark does all the fighting. Yeah.
I think I would give this a bless because it is a Mark card. I don't think any other investigator that is even interested in this. Because if I'm reading this correctly, it says you place the damage on it, right? You assign the damage to it and you cancel it. Does that mean that Mark still gets to trigger his ability even if it does 0 damage afterward?
I don't think so, because if I remember correctly, cancels. Like, it cancels forever. Ooh, I wonder how this interacts with poison, like the Vipers. Okay. Yeah. But
like,
either way,
I do think that there is enough reason to want to play this in certain cases with Mark.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still gonna stay 0 because I think it still does what it does, and there's like, it's kind of the last word in damage soak. Like, there's, you know, it's not like there's anything else out there that like does this but better.
Yeah.
So I think I'm gonna stay at 0.
I think that being said, though, I'm gonna give this a bless token because you have to build your deck to utilize it. Like, I think if you're just stuffing this into like a Roland deck, it's not going to be great. But with Mark, you're getting a lot more utility out of it because you're actively trying to use your else.
Yeah, and you want to actually like take some damage. Yeah, Roland, you'd probably want to do I've had worse level 4 if you've got the XP for it.
Yeah,
because Roland, if you get blasted for sanity, you want to prevent it all. Where like Mark, it's like, no, I want to take a little bit so I can draw the card.
I want to take damage, because I want to draw cards, but I don't want to take too much.
Exactly. You don't want to take the big. You don't want to get smacked by the Ghoul Priest for 2 and 2, you know? Yeah.
And then if it is too much, I can always take like 1 or 2 on me and then heal it off with first aid later, something like that.
Exactly.
That's going to do it for our look at the Guardian cards in the Path to Carcosa Investigator expansion. Let us know in the comments down below what you think. Have you had any experience with these cards? Did we get it right? Did we get it wrong? Let us know in the comments. Any final thoughts on the Guardian cards in the Path to Carcosa in general?
I think this is where we see a turning point with the card design. I think the card design is now beginning to become self-aware in a sense. Like,
Okay.
I think Stick to the Plan is one of those cards that we have identified a problem with the Guardian class.
Oh,
Here is a
right.
card to solve that problem.
Same with Ever Vigilant. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
I mean, I think those two were designed in tandem.
They had to have been.
You
Like,
can't tell me otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to be like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the cards in the box really do give Mark a lot of interesting options that make him different from someone like Zoe. Where Zoe wants to get a big weapon and shoot it or stab it or whatever, but Mark can do some different things, right? Mark can take a 45 and a Colt, and he can maybe do a little bit of investigating, but then he can also very comfortably shoot things.
But only like some of it, because I think also a good chunk of it is that paradigm we kept talking about, where it's like you want to engage the enemies off of Daisy because Daisy is helpless. So we've got trench knife, and we're gonna give you ambush, and we're gonna give you heroic rescue.
They thought that would be a problem, right? So they
exactly.
gave you solutions to try to.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of that play pattern. Like, we're gonna give you a lot of tools for that specific play pattern.
Yeah, because I imagine when you're playing like Dunwich initially, it's like that's probably how most 2-player games went. Was like, I play Daisy, I play someone to protect Daisy, or I play some other investigator and then protect them.
Yeah, and you can even tell when I was pulling up the card reviews from like back in the day that seemed to be the mentality.
Because like back in the day,
how many of these cards were designed like, because we sort of see this split between a card like Stick to the Plan, where it's just like, okay, we've seen how Guardians play, here is an answer to that, versus cards like Heroic Rescue and Ambush, where it's just like, here's how we think the game is going to work out. Here's how we think people are going to play this game, and we are going to provide solutions for them. And then the game took a hard right and didn't turn out to be that way, and so those cards now look like maybe that batch was designed, say back with Corset and Dunwich. Maybe they're holdovers from that time, and then they were released, and at that point the game had already changed, where enemies that were supposed to be big and scary, and we saw plenty of evidence of that in the core set, where enemies were theoretically dangerous, and it turns out well, actually they're not quite as dangerous as we thought they were. So cards that are built with that idea in mind fall flat, and then we end up with cards like Heroic Rescue and Ambush that also fall flat because they were part of that initial design wave, whereas Stick to the Plan and Ever Vigilant and stuff like that are more modern designs that take into account what players actually need.
Totally possible. The turning point, the self-aware moment, as Nate here was saying.
That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromlang@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromlang. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.